You're now plugged in to the Delphi podcast.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Delphi podcast. Today I am delighted to introduce you to Kam, the founder of Pixion Studios, the studio behind Fableborn. One of the founders in the Delphi Ventures portfolio that we're hugely excited to be backing. So Kam, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Good to catch up.
So I wanted to kick things off with just a bit of a personal background on you, give people some familiarity in terms of what you worked on historically. You know, you've got a ton of experience in the sort of like traditional game space, so I'd love to bring people up to speed on that front.
Yeah, I was lucky. So I studied games design. I've always been passionate about gaming since I was 6, played on all the major consoles. So it was a big part of my life growing up. And so naturally went and studied game design and development and fell in love with the product side. So really thinking about how to build player experiences. Was fortunate that straight out of university, first role was at Konami working on some pretty incredible titles, personally as a fan as well, the Metal Gear series and Silent Hill. And I did that for nearly 2 years, obviously learning a lot from Kojima and, incredible game designers and teams, and then realized there was still a very clear gap in knowledge, mostly on the operational side of how are we scaling these games. I started to learn a lot about how to build player-centric games and player-centric design, but not so much, okay, we've built an incredible game. How does that become played by tens of millions of players around the world? And so really wanted to make sure before I found my own company, build my own games, I'm sure that I've got that in my locker in terms of experience and right place, right time. Konami took over the Yu-Gi-Oh IP. Yu-Gi-Oh is probably best known for its anime, trading cards, and video games. Now that, what, over 15 years ago, not so much. And they were launching Yu-Gi-Oh in Europe, and right place, right time. I was the individual that scaled that entire division for Europe. It was a 9-figure IP, and it allowed me to learn so much because we went from just myself, the goal of overtaking Pokemon with small IP in 5 years and battling with them across not only the anime, video games, the toys, the licensing, across the board. It allowed me to really understand, that operational insight into commercially, how do we drive results? How do we drive player interactions outside of just video games? And so the trading cards were a completely different division, completely different audience subset. Same to the anime, those that were buying the toys again. And so learned a lot over 5 or 6 years. We did overtake Pokemon in gross revenue before, so it was a really great achievement from myself, the entire team. But that's obviously a public listed company, and so the resources there are, let's say there's a lot to support me, and that's very different to the way that you're working in a startup where you have to be really scrappy, really resilient. It's a different type of pressure, I'd say. And so the last thing I really want to test myself is, would I thrive under the pressure where you have to make $1 worth $1,000? And I joined a small startup here in London working on Facebook casual games. I'd say looking back retrospectively, they were already 3 years too late as mobile started to really proliferate casual gaming, and Candy Crush had just launched a few years ago, and titles like Clash of Clans launched as well. But I was there for 2 years. The studio shut down, so it wasn't a happy ending in that sense. But I learned so much, and it was an environment that I thrived in and one that I really preferred. And from there, from myself personally as a founder, I checked all the boxes I wanted to check. That gave me the confidence I'm ready to start building and had the expertise, the network behind me to found a studio and be successful.
That's awesome. Really, really appreciate the color on the initial journey there. Would love to understand then, once you'd made that decision into going and sort of like founding something, what was the process in terms of, assembling the Avengers? Who were the people that you went to? You mentioned you had the network, like you got some pretty impressive people on the advisory board and elsewhere. So would love to, hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I guess backstory there is I had two co-founders that I wanted to found Pixion with, but actually the end result is I was a solo founder at the start. which I don't recommend, both from an operational perspective that you want co-founders that can cover blind spots that you would have, and then two, just from mental sanity point of view, definitely recommend having people on your team that you can soundboard with when you're high and low. So I had two co-founders, but quickly realized their definition of success and what they wanted to achieve was very different to mine. Personal opinion is I'd rather start a studio and found a company where there's a very clear vision and we're all going in the same direction, rather than having very different ideologies, let's say at founder level. I've seen that generally never works out well, and so started Pixion by myself, but knew I didn't have that operational insight that could cover some of those blind spots, and so reached out to the network that I had, and like you say, we're very, very blessed, let's say, to have some incredible people there from Near and Alan, who were at King. Neil went on to then sell dots in New York for 300 plus million, went to then join Take Two, acquired Zynga as the first deal that he'd ever done for $12 billion, and now is in Web3, come full circle. And we've got incredible people that have been in the industry for 20 plus years, have worked for some of the biggest names in gaming, both uh, Web 2 and Web 3. We've got those that have taken huge studios to IPO for billion plus dollars. And then we've started to surround ourselves with, more incredible Web3 native minds like yourself, like the Delphi team, to ensure that not only on the Web2 and operational side, on building Web2 products that can scale with Web2 games, but understanding at the intersection how blockchain and crypto fit within those rails. We've got an incredible network now, and in between that, from founding Pixion, the leadership team is best in class. Everyone has been in the space in different industries, from gaming to fintech, and so we've got a broad spectrum of knowledge that look at both problems and solutions with a very different lens, but allow us to come up with a very clear thesis on how to tackle a market that doesn't have a clear blueprint or a one route to success. Feel like we've got a really good range of experience and advice around us.
Awesome. And then, yeah, would love to give listeners like who maybe aren't familiar with Fableborn yet, like, what is it? What was the love? What was the vision? Yeah, talk us through, yeah, the sort of the elevator pitch for Fableborn and the kind of game genre you're tackling here.
Yeah, so Fableborn at its core is a genre blend of action RPG meets strategy based building, and a lot of players like to call it think Diablo meets Clash of Clans, skewing heavily towards the ARPG. And why we came up with this type of game is one, we've always had success as a studio and as individuals in our previous careers prior to Pixion. We've always had success at looking at genres that have maybe become stale, haven't seen any innovation over the last 5, 6, 7 years, then deeply understanding elder game players in those genres, because those are the players that have still stuck around, are still spending, are playing every single day, and understanding what their pain points are, and if we can solve them with innovation, that's where, like I say, we've had our success. And so prior to Fableborn, we actually killed 5 games, and maybe we touch upon that later on. But when we did start to build the blueprint for Fableborn, we quickly realized, after having spoken to over 1,000 Clash of Clans and Rise of Kingdom players, their pain points, particularly with Clash of Clans, was on the raiding side. Because you have to place a unit, almost pixel perfect to ensure that it's going in the right direction and will attack a specific type of the base defense. Otherwise, you're pretty much wrecked. Raiding became really unsatisfying because if you did misplace for whatever reason that unit you can't control. You have two points of control: where you place the unit and what unit you take in. And so we started to flip that and decide, what about if we gave players complete control? And so whether the raid is going well or not it's completely on you. You decide what to attack, how to attack, when to attack. The end result is completely determined by the decisions you make on both a macro and micro level during that 3-4 minute raid. And so we, on paper, decided that seems like a really good core loop. How does it play? As always, we prototype very quickly. The team had lots of fun. And we started to see, even with one hero and a couple of base defense units, so the most primitive core we had of Fableborn, we were already raiding and using different sort of strategies to raid and different base building strategies as well. And that meant to us that there's a lot of depth, even with a small amount of content, a lot of replayability, and importantly, a lot to learn and master. And that's when we really greenlit the game and started to move into production.
And was it always going to be a mobile title you were pursuing based upon stuff you've done historically, or like, yeah, talk us through the rationale of going after that as well?
Yeah, always mobile. I think you and I were, briefly talking about the gaming market over the last few years and where it will be going. And it's no surprise that mobile takes the lion's share of both downloads and revenue. Over 55%, I think, of all gaming revenue is mobile. So when we think about proliferating Fableborn and our ecosystem and reaching the largest amount of players, there's only one very clear winner, and that's mobile. Not everyone has a high-spec gaming PC or a console, but almost everyone. I think there's more mobiles than human beings actually in the world. A funny stat that I saw. And so almost everyone has a mobile phone in their pocket and therefore a gaming device in their pocket. And so mobile was always a clear part of where we were going to build Fableborn, but the team that we'd also assembled and the success that we'd had, all of us in the leadership team had built games that were mobile centric, mid-core multiplayer games. That was our sweet spot. That was our success. That's where, we'd back ourselves to repeat it again.
So you had this sort of early prototype that you realized, in a very restricted version was already unlocking a lot of depth, and you guys are really enjoying it. Like, what was the process from realizing, like, okay, we want to run with this and we're excited by it, to then also thinking crypto, let's try and put aspects of this on chain? Like, what are the things that stood out in terms of pain points it could solve for you guys as developers?
Yeah, I think there's a few parts, both on the product level and then just if we zoom out a little on, the business side and the commercial side of things. Fundamentally, if I start with the latter, the Web2 business model certainly is becoming flawed or is flawed. The unit economics no longer really stack up. I think we see that as a byproduct of how many Web2 teams are unfortunately reducing and letting go of staff. It's really difficult. And a big part of that is there's lots of fun games, but they're not seeing and retaining or even able to acquire players at scale. UA is no longer efficient. IDFA was, one of the nails in the coffin that made, I think, certainly for mobile, UA and particularly performance marketing less efficient. You're throwing dollars at an algorithm that no longer knows if Piers is actually going to spend money, if he's going to buy items, or if he's going to download and play for free. A majority of players would download and play for free. And so it really became difficult to scale a Web2 business. And so then when we think about that as one of the North Stars, how do we acquire and bring in and align players? It was very early on, actually, in 2020. So before, I guess the crypto gaming and crypto cycle is a boom, and Web3 gaming in 21, we started to discover two communities in particular, Splinterlands and Axie Infinity. And although their play communities were still right now quite primitive, maybe a couple of thousand, those few thousand were very, very loud, super fans, and extremely passionate. We'd call them golden cohort players. And so these players are evangelists. They will stay with you through the highs and the very, very lows. And the network effects that they're going to create are going to be exponential. So we started to really try and understand why are these two games that again were still primitive in their own right as well, or why do they have such loyal, loud communities, that evangelists, they're creating so much content across so many different social spaces. To do that in Web2, in particular on mobile, you're probably spending millions of dollars just to get to that level of, I guess, network effects that are being created. And so we started to really understand that at that time, fungible tokens and their token, although value was, almost meaningless at that time, it created that sense of ownership. And I think we talk a lot about, value and ownership in Web3. What we probably don't focus too much on is the value of owning something. It isn't just the monetary value, but it's that emotional attachment that it creates between us, the developer, and the player. And what we saw is that these parts of the game that were being given to the community really felt like, okay, I'm not only a player, but I'm part of this. I'm helping support the team, the developers, and we're building it together. We're one ecosystem, we're one community. It's not developers and players or community. It's one entity almost. And that I think is something that we fell in love with. Some of us in the team started to participate in those games, were part of those communities really early on. And that I think set us online into really delving into how both on-chain economies, so fungible and non-fungible tokens, can really start to bootstrap tokens and find those first super fans. And then, of course, there's a superior business model, and I think we can probably dive deeper into that. But first and foremost, it was tackling and disrupting UA. How do you find those first true super fans that you build alongside?
Absolutely. And yeah, what definitely want to dig into sort of the business model unlocks as well. But for those listening, would also love if you can give us like a snapshot overview of like some of the metrics to come out of the ecosystem so far, right? So you've been running a few of these campaigns, but like even before you were turning on any sort of like, prospective incentives or whatever, I think a lot of the organic installs and feedbacks and feedback that we were seeing was really, really impressive. So we'd love if you could give an overview of that.
Yeah, so we've been building Fableborn for what, 2+ years now, and we've always focused on the best product will create the largest network effects, allow us to then grow the largest ecosystem. And so the first time we ever put Fableborn open into an open beta was last year in August. And we didn't know what to expect because prior to that, it was only closed or holder playtest, maybe a few hundred people to low few thousand at most. And so we opened it up. We didn't have too much marketing apart from what we were sharing on our own channels. There's no paid UA, there's no, KOLs or anything like that. It was put the game out, see what happens, since it's the first open test. And within the first 24 hours, we had 50,000 players. Our servers crashed because we weren't expecting that in the first day. We had over 5,000 days of playtime in 2 weeks. Uh, Eventually, we peaked at just under 80,000 players, and since then, we've had a couple of more open play tests. The last one, 150,000 players, staggeringly over 100,000 days of playtime in 2 weeks, which I still ask our data guys to triple and quadruple check because
Yeah.
it doesn't seem real. Each player spending at least 3 hours a day, and this is without incentives for the whole 2 weeks. I
Mm.
think that's what's unique about Fableborn is that there's a short time window where you play, and in that live event, that time limited event, you're competing for rewards, and that's your incentive. Outside of that, you're playing for fun, and that is really, I think, encapsulating the broader reach, but also how Fableborn is perceived in the market. That yes, it's a really cool incentive that will allow us to create superior network effects, but equally, those players are there coming before and sticking around after because the game is truly fun and something that they enjoy.
Absolutely. No, super, super cool to hear, and excited to see what comes in the next few tests that are getting opened up. I'm curious as well then what you think is different about, leveraging all of your sort of like traditional gaming experience and how you guys have approached it. Like, what do you feel is unique about your sort of culture and approach to community building then? Like, obviously product we've touched on is something that clearly holds a lot of allure and is exciting people. But I think you guys have been running a really tight sort of like incentive campaign as well and how you guys have been approaching that. So would love to hear from you on that front.
Yeah, so I think community building again is, really important, but how you build communities is, I'd say, more important. And we've seen and we've been able to obviously observe from the sidelines how communities were being built and adopted over last cycle. And primarily it was driven entirely by, financial gain and incentives. And I think that's one lever that you can control and one lever that you have in your arsenal. But it also means that a lion's share of those in your community are completely transactional. And that's fine. But if you're no longer able to serve that motivation, you do XYZ and you get X dollars back, then that player's motivation is no longer being served. They're going to leave to another community that can. And so we obviously wanted to try and attract, certainly early on, while we're still building Fableborn and the game wasn't live, we wanted to ensure that those players that were there or those users that were there were only interested in the vision, the team, what we were building, the promise of Fableborn, and obviously the game itself. And so for the first, I'd say, 18 months, there's no information. I'd say even now we're still quite tight-lipped for the time being on, what the Web3 elements of Fableborn are, although we're starting to uh, unveil a little more. We've always been very focused on first and foremost the product, and our Discord had, I think, 15,000 players, and we had yet to even speak about an NFT collection launching or a token. And there was really no reason for you to be in our Discord unless you enjoyed what was there, which was the game and what we were building and the vision of what we were trying to build. And so that has given us a great platform and a base to really scale.
Love all of that. Yeah, I'm also curious then as well, like coming from Web 2, like what are some of the sort of UX frictions that you guys have had to navigate already, right? Because like I know maybe some more of the sort of like on-chain loops and whatever aren't fully online yet, but obviously in terms of dev build out and stuff, you guys are navigating all those things at the moment. Would love any like very stark standout things that you guys have had to solve for.
Yeah, I think the biggest premise is, just how much education is there. And so irregardless of how frictionless you can make onboarding, and I think Ronin do this really well, and it's one of the reasons why we're building there, the Ronin Waypoint. You sign in with a social login and you're there. But even from there, a non-crypto native user, there's so much to onboard and so much information in front of you and so much data. Every wallet is almost like a spreadsheet. And so, irregardless of how you remove a lot of the friction for you to get to that wallet or for you to display that information, I think it's going to still be an uphill battle. And so, a big part of how we think about UX is almost like an onion, peeling away some of the complexity through gamification. And so when you start Fadeborn, the first minute isn't logging into a wallet or it isn't exposing you to the Web3 rails. You're learning about how to raid other players' bases. And then you start to learn more about how you can upgrade your hero. And that's when you'll start to understand about some of your on-chain economies, some of those on-chain resources that you can start to maybe acquire. And I think through layers of complexity, you can overcome some of that UX or some of those UX challenges through gamification. If it feels like you're actually studying and you're back at school, then I don't think any Web2 player or any Web2 user is going to jump in on board, or certainly not many of them. And so we're really trying to gamify and use Fableborn as the, I guess, education layer um, to try and onboard players. And like I say, first and foremost, that speaks to, I guess, going back to player motivations. It speaks to driving player interaction with their player motivation. And most Web2 players, first and foremost, don't want to come in and start thinking about crypto and that layer of Web3. What they want to think about is, do I like this game? And they'll make that decision in 5 minutes. And so our first focus is ensuring that they do like what they're playing before exposing them to a deeper meta layer and the Web3 layer.
Absolutely. I was also curious then, we kind of touched on it earlier, but want to go back to it then, like in terms of the business model unlock that you guys see here, right? Like in terms of beyond, solving the UA piece, like yeah, where was the real opportunity that you guys saw that sort of made you gravitate towards this?
Yeah, so I'd say there's probably three things, right? Obviously, the UA part, which we touched on. I believe the best studios are going to be able to create much larger network effects and therefore acquire players at a much lower cost than traditional Web 2. There's also word of mouth is going to create a much larger effect as well, or be a much larger component of a studio's marketing mix and driving that word of mouth. So that's one area. The second is through different incentives models that I believe digital economies and on-chain economies will allow us to create. And this is still an unexplored design space, but truly our belief is that these on-chain economies will create stronger alignment between us as a studio and our players. And I'll bucket players into, various different segments, from those that just want to compete, from those that just want to be part of a community, that those that just want to speculate, and those that actually just want to earn. And so bucketing all those players together, there'll be a much closer alignment and allow us to create a much tighter alignment that will create, in our opinion, longer tail retention, allow us to therefore create longer tail LTV and therefore just stack better unit economics. It will be cheaper to acquire players, they'll stick around longer, and we believe they'll spend more because there's much more alignment and incentives to do so. And then third and finally, I think the big part is actually just growing the TAM of mobile gaming. And so 2009, mobile gaming was, I think, 250 million players. Or gaming as a whole, sorry, was 250 million players. Now it's over 3 billion, and a large part of that is because of mobile. And I always have to look close to home, which is my own mum. 15 years ago, we'd never call this 60-year-old woman a gamer. But now, still daily, she will tell me about what level she is on Candy Crush. She still spends more time playing mobile games than I do. She spends a lot more on IAP than I do, and so we'd classify that. I know King will classify her as a gamer, and so I really believe those conventions and norms of what we'd classify as a gamer are going to be broken down further. We saw a sliver of that, I believe, with Axie and in the last cycle, that there were individuals that were participating in the ecosystem, playing, transacting, that would either that was their first gamified experience and they'd never done it before. And so I truly believe that Web3 is also going to onboard hundreds of millions of more players, and emerging markets are going to be a big driver of that. And that, I think, again, is a huge unlock for any game studio.
Absolutely. So you haven't quite got your mother playing Fableborn yet. Is she working up to that?
She tried, and actually on tutorial, she's like, this is too difficult. So I think for her, she's happy with swiping left and right and tapping, but yeah, hopefully we'll onboard her at some point.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I wanted to move to ask a bit about then, like how you view sort of live ops then in this new arena of doing things on chain. Like, I feel like in many ways it makes it harder to do, right? You're like restricted in some ways, and obviously things can have big implications. And so, curious about yeah, how you're confronting that and how you're carrying historical learnings into navigating that.
Yeah, I'd say live ops is almost, your cheat card into creating sustainable Web3 economies. So if I rewind a bit, game economies are, always digital economies. That's how we see it. Whether it's Web 2 or Web 3, that doesn't change. What does change is how you maybe need to manage those digital economies. Obviously, with an open economy, things certainly change. Why we see LiveOps as, like I say, an integral part of how we will scale Fableborn, but also scale the Power ecosystem is LiveOps in its nature is time limited. And so it's built within and an integral part of your core loop of your metagame. But you have levers to be able to inflate the economy and then shut it down uh, and drain it back out. And importantly, the teams that do that the best and have those feedback loops and have data on both sides of the types of players participating and then what those players are doing with any assets introduced into the economy, those are the ones that, in my opinion, are going to win big. And the beauty, I think, of Fableborn is we've already been testing that out, and players might not know that, but like I said, those 2-week open betas, there's a very small window and time limited events where you can earn or have the potential to earn various different rewards. And then that time limited event is turned off and you're playing Fableborn, whether it's a campaign, it's a PvP, but there's no on-chain rewards. That loop in itself is, like I say, allowing us to bring in players, create a very clear incentive, decide how much we want to inflate the economy and what we want to inflate it with. Do we want to inflate it with our token, an NFT, other on-chain resources? Equally, then we can also decide and restrict what types of players come in. Is it an open event? Do you have to have a specific hero leveled up to a specific player level, own a specific item, etc., etc. So there's so many levers we can control to decide what types of players then enter, and then what the winning conditions are. And so we've now decided, okay, the reward is going to be, let's say, our power token. Who is this power token going to go to? And so we can decide the criteria of what players need to achieve to be able to do that. And then after we shut down that time limited event, there's no more supply. So we know this is the amount of power in Fableborn now that's circulating. Are our sinks now draining that out? And if they aren't, we understand why. We can battle test them and improve it for the next live event. And if they do, we can start to see, well, what are players using this power token for? Are they holding? Are they accumulating? Are they selling straight away? What types of players are accumulating? And then what do they spend on? What items are triggering more conversions, more transactions? And so every single event, we're just getting smarter and we're getting more and more insights into different types of players and what their actions are. And like I say, that's possible because LiveOps is almost a sandbox. We have Fableborn as a core game, the meta game, the progression layer. And then we introduce these time-limited events that, again, still a big part of Fableborn, that have time-limited offers, time-limited rewards. And importantly, it gives us the levers to be able to control, like I say, the inflationary pressure on that economy and our ability to drain it out. And I'd say that's the biggest lesson we learned from just observing 2021 and 2022 is there's some games like Axie as well, that scaled, but it was uncontrollable inflation pressure. There's no way to turn it off. And so it's just unfortunately a route essentially all the way down once new players started to slow down and new installs started to slow down. And LiveOps, like I say, give us that control and that ability to be able to manage that and curate that economy much better.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, what are some of the like kind of sort of fail-safe backup levers that you guys would employ then? Like, let's say for whatever reason, maybe some of the data had gone slightly awry and slightly muddled, and like, you accidentally sort of triggered too much inflation over X period. Like, what are some of the things you guys regard as like sort of the backstop to that as well?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of different components and sinks that we can introduce, right? And so the ability is to say, we know Piers is, he's a tank hero. Like he's been playing tank heroes and maining tank heroes in Fableborn for the last 3 weeks. And so we realized that actually he's got way too much power than he should have received for whatever reason. And so now we're going to give you a special offer that says you can get this new tank hero with all his upgraded equipment, his armor for this much power. And that is exclusive just for this bucket of players. That includes you. And so we have those levers, and I guess that in our arsenal to be able to, in front of you, understand what is Piers really interested in, what would he like to purchase, what has he purchased before, and then try and put that again in front of you. And let's say outside of time limited offers or hyper personalized offers like that, there's also things that we can do within Fableborn itself. So a part of what we'll be including is how power within hero progression can be used, not only on the hero itself and what that does to the stats of a hero, but how you can also hyper personalize that hero with different equipment and equipment slots. So we can increase or decrease, the cost of these things. We can introduce more supply of different NFTs if we want to drive a price down or increase the price and not release any more NFTs of this particular, let's say, shield. Outside of a game as well, we're going to, and we've been working on daily quests that are intertwined with Fableborn. So, for example, achieve 5 3-star raids in PvP, achieve a 10-minute survival time in Siege Survival. So, objectives that are really driven by engaging in the game, but allow you to potentially earn rewards, but also some of those tasks will require you to buy and opt in. So you'll have a free list of objectives and then a VIP list, I guess, of objectives that provide superior rewards, but also require you to spend and unlock that tier of objectives. So there's a lot of different levers that we'll have, and importantly, like I say, LiveOps gives you time, and I think that unfortunately the teams that built and scaled games in 21 and 2, they didn't have too much time to be able to react to what was going on around them.
I think one of the big challenges as well, that's obviously unique to crypto, to on-chain economies, is just like exogenous demand drivers, right? Like if everyone starts bidding or dumping or whatever, like people that aren't even necessarily playing the game, but obviously appreciate and admire what you're doing and want to like, yeah, get behind it. Like, how do you think about coping with that as well? Like not only what that can do in terms of potentially adverse effects on what you're trying to achieve with the live ups, but also making it attractive, right, from people that maybe just are here to own the asset. They're like, okay, this looks like the most promising mobile product out there, like want to get behind this. Like it's that sort of double-edged blade of like, yeah, how do you on the one side manage that exogenous demand and on the other actually entice it, right? Because you also, generally speaking, want this thing to go up.
Yeah. And I think with what Limit Break, they did an incredible job of releasing the new standard, and app tokens, I think is a really interesting new standard, and they released a cookbook of so many different ways that you can implement app tokens and create almost different types of asset classes within the game. And so you'll have your primary token power that potentially as an asset class, you want to, like you say, incentivize and allow different types of players or users of your ecosystem, those that are highly engaged or those that maybe have a lot of dollars and want to be more passive but potentially ride the upside. Uh, and then you have on a more granular level the ability to really start to create a more of a defined framework. So it could be this resource that's an on-chain asset like gold or gold resource that you can only use to upgrade your hero. You can define parameters of this will always be the ceiling. So the floor price of this asset will always be, $50. Uh, and or max would always be $50, and it can be lower than that. And that allows you, like I say, to create an environment where players that are deeply engaged, they're they're not they're not facing, let's say, an Axie Infinity issue where you're having to drop $2,000 just to start playing the game. But equally, there's an asset class that allows you as a different type of user to ride the upside or speculate on the upside. So I we're already looking into it, and I think most Web2 or Web3 games that will scale economies will have different types of asset classes. And like I say, props to the Limit Break team and releasing app tokens as a new standard to help usher that in.
Yeah, absolutely. Very excited to see how people, leverage all of that tooling and see what's unlocked in the coming months. I wanted to talk a little bit about, like your plan for 2025. Like, what does the journey ahead look like? Maybe we could touch a little bit on, relatively recently announcing the whole sort of Ronin allegiance, the path towards that. What people can expect in the next, 3 6 months, and would love to hear of some of the magic that you're cooking up longer term as well.
Yeah, so first and foremost is always obviously launching category winner, that is Fableborn. That's always been our first play. If we look back, the biggest winners and the biggest infra and ecosystem winners have onboarded the masses first and foremost by best in class product and content plays. So Epic Games with Unreal Engine, it was Fortnite and Gears of War prior to that. Half-Life and Steam was, or Valve, it was Half-Life before Steam. And even Sky Mavis, Web3. It was Axie Infinity really creating Web3 gaming, and now Ronin have done a great job in creating this ecosystem and this infra play that's provided a lot more defensibility for the RON token itself. And so, how we look at our infra and ecosystem play is ushering in and onboarding millions of players through content. And first and foremost, it will be Fableborn. It's one that we've worked on for some time, and looking forward to everyone being able to play that persistently this year. I know there's a lot of disgruntled community members when we have to take the servers offline, and so bringing that live and allowing them to play is really exciting for us. And from there, it won't stop. And so, first party games is, like I say, a big part of our focus over the next few months. But we've been building a lot of tooling around not only how we scale games, but a lot of what we touched about, how we identify different types of players, how we run live ops, how we grow and scale digital economies. That tooling is something that we've been using and have been building to be able to scale organically Fableborn to date, and looking forward to obviously being able to scale further. What we want to be able to do is show and leverage that tooling and really decentralize that so third-party games can come and build on our ecosystem with our tooling, our expertise, the infra that we've built to be able to scale Fableborn. And the goal is really to start looking at Ronin as our first stop. Obviously, they go permissionless next year. I think Ronin are known as probably the best gaming chain. Players and tens of thousands of players are always talking about Ronin. They have hundreds of thousands, or if not millions, of daily active users across the different types of games. But they'll also be changing of how they start to operate and support different types of games. And so there's an opportunity in my eyes that the best games on Ronin will attract a lot of eyeballs, both from a capital perspective, but also in terms of projects that are wanting to replicate. And that's where we want to leverage the power ecosystem. First to scale Fableborn, and then to help and act as a growth layer for new game teams and then beyond games later on, probably in the latter half of this year, allowing them to come in and build and scale on Ronin as well. So starts with Fableborn, and like I say, allows us to really use that as a springboard to support other game teams and other projects building on Ronin from then on.
Super exciting. Yeah, I'm very curious to see how that manifests and what the first chosen few are to come and partake. And then as it relates to like the Fableborn like broader rollout more specifically, like what can people expect in terms of timeline to some more of that coming online?
Yeah, so next season we're going to be announcing fairly soon. Uh, we've got a lot of excitement about what we've been building. Uh, we're also going to announce or have just announced our new NFT collection. We've taken a lot of inspiration from the Sky Mavis team and what made Axie Infinity really special, and then looked at how we can gamify that and really blend that in with what makes Fableborn unique in itself and what attracts players to Fableborn. That asynchronous PvP core loop of everyone is building and leveling up their kingdom, and then raiding other players for resources. How we build that and create that gamified loop on an NFT collection layer is one that we're really excited about, and we're going to be, like I say, we've just announced that, and we'll be sharing a lot more about that in the coming days and few weeks. And then, of course, following that with season four, and it's going to play a big part in season four as well. So excited to just see how players in and outside of Fableborn, the game, are interacting with this part of the ecosystem.
Nice. Yeah, very, very excited for all of that. Kind of wanted to head into a few sort of like closing questions here. I'm curious, like, what has stood out for you the most thus far? Like, what have been some of the key learnings from the foray into crypto that perhaps you wish you'd known when you started out?
Yeah, there's so many learnings. Boiling that down to probably one or two is realizing that, you have different types of users, and those users have very different motivations, and so you're building almost different products. So Fairborn in itself is its own product. The Power ecosystem in itself is its own product, and then Power as a token is its own product. And I'd say when we first jumped into this space in 2020 and started to build within it, we were quite naive that this is all intertwined, and so we start with product and everything else falls into place. But actually, there's very, like I say, different types of users that have very different motivations. And just building Fableborn and thinking about Fableborn and building a great game, is that going to serve the player that is speculating, that maybe wants to jump in and drop $100,000 on NFTs and then look at how they can passively ride the success of Fableborn and the Power ecosystem? That wasn't something we were thinking about 4 years ago. We were very much just thinking about building a great game, and so uh, that's probably the biggest lesson for us, is understanding that there's multiple different types of user personas, and the products that we're building, although intertwined, are their own products entirely.
Very interesting. Yeah, seems like always the challenge to juggle all of these things simultaneously. But yeah, excited for the way you guys are approaching it, and yeah, looking forward to seeing how things evolve this year. Um, I wanted to ask as well, what would you regard as the most impactful digital experience you've ever had?
Yeah, this is again hard to boil it down to one, so I'll quickly boil it down to maybe three. The first is over a decade ago now at Konami, we were prototyping a portable scanner to scan your Yu-Gi-Oh physical cards that you could then own and use in any of the Yu-Gi-Oh video games across then mobile, PC, and handheld. Thinking about it then, that was probably our first foray into thinking and trying to execute and build out NFTs as an ecosystem. Obviously, back then we weren't aware of it. Unfortunately, Konami didn't move forward with that. But I remember playing and using that prototype and having my own deck as a physical collection, and just also being a collector of the cards and being able to scan them and now use them across the entire Yu-Gi-Oh ecosystem and the Yu-Gi-Oh slate of games. That was transformational for me. And the second, probably buying Bitcoin at 2K in 2017, and then fumbling generational wealth and selling it at 30K 3 years later. I had a few Bitcoin, but in any case, seeing that wild ride and what, like a 15x over a few years, was pretty transformational. And then probably earning, a few $1,000s from just walking and buying digital shoes in Steppen. Uh, Again, that really hit home on how you can create these new types of gamified economies, and seeing how Steppen scaled, and the types of users that were playing, and the types of individuals that were talking about Steppen, and those network effects that were created from providing this wealth generation opportunity. I'd say those three, for different reasons, it took a lot of lessons from.
Interesting. Yeah, 15x over 3 years. It's just your average morning in the trenches in Solana overnight. But yeah, really cool as well on the Yu-Gi-Oh front. That's interesting. I never had come across that. But yeah, all very cool. I'm curious as well. Your favorite video game ever?
Favorite video game is Metal Gear Solid 2. And many will probably say it's not the best Metal Gear. I will die on that lonely hill and say it is. Um, but I've just got some incredible memories from the way that I was anticipating actually getting it, being able to play during the holidays, spending countless late nights trying to defeat some of the bosses. And Kojima, I think, is a mastermind in storytelling. So it was one of the first games that I really lost myself in, not just enjoyed, but was fully immersed. So yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2.
I love that. Interesting. Haven't ever heard anyone pick that, I don't think. Have you played many of the newer Kojima stuff like Death Stranding? There's some new one
I,
as
I
well coming
played
out.
Death Stranding, and maybe it's me, my type of game has changed, but I'm time poor now. I think everyone is time poor, but when I play games, I look at, do I have 15, 20 minutes free, and can I jump in, play a couple of rounds, whatever it may be,
Hmm.
and jump back out? And if it requires me to sit down for 2 hours, something I could do 20 years ago, no problem, but now absolutely, it's almost
Yeah,
impossible. I just can't get into because I will start. Uh, Elden Ring was another one. Like I'd start a boss battle, and I love that type of game, but a boss battle would take me 100 tries and like 4 hours, and I just can't do that. And if you leave that game for 5, 6, 7 weeks and come back, you're back at starting point. You're a
absolutely.
noob in that game, and the learning curve is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting broader trends, right? Is like how your average gamer does have less and less time, and like figuring out ways to the sort of player archetype that has less time, but actually drives a lot of the spend in games, like figuring out ways to engage them and, cater not just to the like casual 10, 20 minutes, but like,
Mm.
people that want to spend 8 hours a day in it as well, all in the same like game. Figuring out how to juggle all of those things and be appealing across the spectrum is something that's quite exciting. But yeah, Death Stranding rightly ridiculed as a walking simulator. Big time sink on that. I'm excited
I
to
couldn't say it. I couldn't
yeah.
say it, but uh, let's say I churned from it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm excited to see his new thing that he's doing with Microsoft called OD. It's going to be some altogether new form of media. Let's see. Um,
It will be different. Whether it'll stick, that's from maybe something to discuss, but it will definitely be something that we've not seen before.
yeah, looking forward to that. And then, yeah, lastly, wanted to ask, what is the most impactful book you've ever read?
I'd say learned optimism.
Hmm.
And I think as a founder, as a CEO, and particularly in this space, when every day you can be coming across obstacle as obstacle, you have to be able to intrinsically really have a clear driver that's motivating you. And whatever that is, it's completely subjective, but having those tools to be able to almost ruthlessly every single day come in with the same enthusiasm despite there's more chances of failure than success, but still being almost delusional with that optimism that actually that we will succeed and this is why we'll succeed. And like I say, having that same enthusiasm and optimism every single day. I remember reading that book and it really resonated, and there's recommend it to everyone. Lots of really, really great insights, and for any founder or anyone that's maybe going through a difficult journey, trying to build something that hasn't been built before, one that I recommend.
Interesting. Not come across that before, but sounds yeah, very on brand, as you say, particularly for crypto. The naysayers have been calling everyone delusional since $100 Bitcoin. So there we go. Um, Cam, it's been a pleasure having you on. I'm very excited for everything you guys are doing. Yeah, still think what you guys are working on is one of, if not the best mobile product out there. So very excited to see what this year holds. And yeah, pleasure to be along for the journey and learning from you guys as you navigate this space. And yeah, for everyone that's listening in, like, where's the best place for them to follow along with your stuff and keep tabs on the ecosystem?
Yeah, Twitter and Discord, that's where I'm active, Fable Team's active. You'll find a lot of sneak peeks, alpha there first. And so if Fableborn Power, what we're building is something that you're interested in, our Twitter or Discord.
Perfect. Kam, thank you so much. Been a pleasure. Hope to have you on again soon.
Likewise, thanks for having me.